Hi, welcome to Marking the Role. Good to have you listening. Marking the Role is a podcast for teachers and anyone interested in education. We're based in the 𝗙𝗏𝗏 area of Australia, but really we're for teachers everywhere. Last week our topic was on student rights and quality education, and if some of those rights were actually starting to intrude on the quality of education that Australian students receive. We looked specifically at safety, inclusion and privacy. Now, I'm not going to revise what was said in that podcast. Just go and listen to episode 13. You can get all the episode points, though, in text form by going to markingtherole.com.au and just clicking on Key Episode Points. I will, though, be spending a couple of minutes just reading out some emails and some comments from teachers and listeners and trying to address a couple of the issues that are raised. Had a email from Shane saying that the podcast was a puppet for the New South Wales Teachers Federation. It was too far to the left, and how could we get balance? So Shane, we're not aligned with the Teachers Federation. I'm not a member of the Teachers Federation. I actually disagree with about 30% of what the Federation does. So Shane, we're not a puppet of the Teachers Federation. We're simply supporting teachers, understanding what they're going through and looking at ways that could possibly help. This is giving a voice to teachers where they don't have a voice, and they are constantly reminded that they cannot speak out against their state education department. Now, that is a form of bullying, I suppose you could call it. It's a little bit like Putin's Russia, that you can't speak out against the administration. Had another email from Garth, pretty short one, and he said this: "You are a right-wing program wanting to wind back the clock. Good luck." Well, thanks, Garth. We've had one comment saying that we're left-wing, and now you're saying we're right-wing. Look, winding back the clock to something perhaps a bit better and looking at the good things that have happened in history, that's important. But we are not associated with any government department, political party, union. We're simply a podcast aiming to give teachers a voice, because I know, our producer knows that they're in desperate need of a voice at this time. But there's been some terrific positive cards and letters, well, not really cards and letters, emails and text messages, Facebook messages, and Lee Louise, our producer, is going to take us through a couple of them.
Yes, Phil. This one's from Jane in Tasmania. She just wanted to say that she truly appreciates the podcast and the message. "My job is making me sick. I love it, but I feel exploited. I hope the right people are hearing your message."
Here's one from Cassie. "Thanks for speaking up when we are silenced from doing so, as the Code of Conduct prohibits criticising the DET. Our principal loves reminding us of that." Yes, that's what I mentioned a little bit earlier in the podcast, Cassie. It's a little bit Putin-esque, isn't it?
And another from Sophie in Queensland. "For the first time in my career, I feel seen and understood. It's a breath of fresh air when I've been drowning for so long. Thank you, Phil and the team."
And thanks, Sophie.
And one more from another Sophie from Ballarat. "Keep doing your good work. This is what we need to get these discussions out in the open. Hearing your podcast is like talking to a colleague in the staff room. Such solidarity."
And finally, I want to thank 𝗙𝗏𝗃𝗁𝗃𝗁𝗃, who has bought us 5 coffees. That's a donation of $25 to the podcast. So thanks very much, 𝗙𝗏, for that. That really does help. And any other listeners who are feeling a little bit rich, You can buy us a coffee by going to markingtherole.com.au and just click on the little yellow coffee cup. Now to this episode's topic, which is teacher professional development. Every profession has to go through professional development, whether you're a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, a plumber. You have to go through that and have certain points each year to say that you've done this amount of courses. Now, I'm afraid that a lot of the comments and messages we've received about teacher PD hasn't been very positive. The word boring keeps coming up again and again. So Lee and I are just going to take you through a couple of the messages that we've received about teacher PD. And the first email's from Estelle, and Estelle said, "Most PD is mind-numbing survival rather than useful, as we all arrive with different experience and the PD dumbs it down to the lowest common denominator. The best PD would be if we were allowed to sit down with colleagues from other schools teaching the same subjects and share what is working for us and brainstorm ideas where we are all struggling. We do a little of this informally at sports grounds in stolen 5-minute chats, so know the value and potential of a round table." Yeah, and that's a good and certainly a cheap way of doing PD.
And here's another one from Lucille. "Many of them are not helpful. I'm also annoyed that NSW keeps changing the goalposts on our maintenance hours. Shouldn't we be able to choose PD that interests us so that we are more engaged in learning rather than ticking boxes?"
And this one from Judith. "I want the freedom to get PD in areas we recognise our weaknesses in, rather than school-wide mandated PD." That's another good point. Teachers are very good at recognising their weaknesses and what they need to tidy up, and the mandated stuff just means they're always doing that.
You're listening to Marking the Role, a podcast for teachers and anyone interested in education. We discuss the real issues facing educators without fear or favour. Please follow us on Facebook, subscribe to our podcast and tell your friends. For more info, go to markingtherole.com.au.
And just as Judith said, when you have to do either school-wide or statewide mandated PD, there is no time left to look after your own individual needs as what you really need to learn and to focus on. And I thought the best way to work our way through some of these PD issues is to have a panel discussion. And here we go. Okay, for this panel discussion, I'd like to introduce Josh O'Brien. Josh is a teacher from an independent school in Sydney. Hi, Josh.
G'day, Phil. Thanks for having me.
And Margaret Dwyer, a English teacher from a regional departmental school in New South Wales. Hi, Marg.
Hello, Phil.
Today's topic is teacher PD. And look, in the experience of you two, is the teacher PD really addressing the needs of teachers in 2022? It's a bit of a different environment now than it was 5 years ago. Josh, do you think it's doing its job?
Look, I think there's an undeniable place for teacher professional development in the school, but I feel that there's particularly over the last couple of years, there's been a wider, more generic approach taken to teacher professional learning. And a lot of that voice has been taken away from schools and from individual teachers. And look, for me, that's sort of taking away from the effectiveness that could potentially have, on teachers and for students as well.
So it's a more formulaic approach that covers everything rather than individual schools. What about you, Mark?
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think part of the issue is that we have so many things that we need to do to keep us compliant, and it actually ends up taking away from the things that we need to develop in terms of our teaching practice and our knowledge. So a lot of our PD is taken up with the compliance element rather than what helps us to progress in our delivery of the curriculum.
Yes, you're not the first one to mention that. Everyone says this compliance. It seems to be pretty full on.
Yeah, look, a lot of the compliance stuff is all online. I think probably first aid is the only thing that has a practical component to it, but it doesn't mean that it isn't time consuming.
Josh, you would be able to access the same online courses, I suppose.
Well, being from an independent school, there's a little bit some different requirements as well that are, tick, I would say probably the same boxes as the department schools, but just from different perspectives. An example, if we have to do some annual modules, WH&S and acceptable workplace behaviour and etc. None of these things happen during allocated time, so that's often quite difficult for teachers to manage to do in their own time, but also requirements around, again, I hate to use the buzzword, but compliance around mandated hours towards selected courses.
Yeah, I think what you mean there, I know the PD in New South Wales has got to revolve around disability, yes, Indigenous studies and inclusion. I think that's the three, isn't it?
Yeah, they're the ones that I'm getting at, yeah.
Yeah.
And so, they're done over, I think it's a 5-year span. There has to be a certain number of hours done as part of your accreditation, rather than focusing on what would make you a better professional and allow you to deliver the curriculum more effectively for the students in your classroom, or lead the school more effectively. We're working towards content which may or may not be relevant for our context.
Yes, absolutely. So you look at some schools with no Indigenous context whatsoever, and that you've still got to do that. You're in the same situation, Marg. I guess you have more of an Indigenous perspective, but do you find that those three areas that you have to cover really take away from the other important areas that need to be looked at?
I actually think that they go hand in hand, Phil, and I think it's really important that we do focus on those three elements, and with that focus, there's a greater potential for the reduction in behaviour issues.
Yes, and I suppose if it can be put into practice in each school.
Exactly, and that then comes down to a broad range of things, and it's the quality of the PD that is delivered. It's the interest and engagement of the teachers. It's the general school culture. It just keeps growing in terms of how many stakeholders we have in order to make it possible for us to facilitate the things that we learn.
And we'll stay with you, Marg. What makes good for good PD? What are the things that you like to see and that engages you and your colleagues?
Not Zoom. I think as much as Zoom and online learning has made things accessible, especially in regional areas, the engagement level is much lower. And you're sitting there on your laptop, you're doing marking, people are talking to you down the corridors. You're not as engaged as you are if you're sitting face to face with someone.
Look, for me, it's all about relevance in your school's context. So for us, it's been very much about what's important to us at our school. It's been back to the basics, assessment. It's been managing challenging behaviours. It's been unpacking the 2 or 3 new syllabus documents that we're going to be unpacking and teaching and mandated over the next couple of years. So we've spent a lot of time trying to understand what's relevant to our context and understanding the journey that our staff have been on, and learning our students' needs and how we're going to best get them through these next couple of years with positive learning outcomes.
And are you sick of the Zoom stuff as well?
We've been able to step away from Zooms and be back into face-to-face meetings for the most part. But believe me, at the beginning of this year, I've never seen a more disengaged staff team than sitting parent-teacher interviews via Zoom.
Good heavens!
For the fourth or fifth cycle in a row.
So, really, what makes for a good PD session? Does it need to be entertaining as well as educational? Because I've been to some PT and it was just mogadon. It was so boring. I hope it's not still like that, but I fear maybe it is. So, what makes for a good session?
Phil, think about a lesson. Okay, we're setting out a clear learning intention. Okay, we're setting out from the start. What are we achieving by doing this? We have to make it so that it's real, so that it's relevant, so that it's rich, and teachers have to actually see the purpose of what they're doing. If teachers can't see the purpose of what they're doing, they don't know why they're doing it, they're going to be disengaged automatically.
Yeah, look, I would definitely agree with what Josh is saying, and I think it really is presenting 101 to be engaging, be relevant, and set that, as Josh said, set that learning intention. That's what we do day in, day out. And to try and get people who do that for a profession to engage in something when that sort of process isn't being followed, you will lose us straight away.
And so we don't lose you straight away. Time for a brain break where we give your brain a bit of a chance to relax, go somewhere else for a while. And this brain break is from Russell 𝗏𝗏. He's known as Rusty Bucket here in the Illawarra. And this is a traditional song, The Wayfaring Stranger.
I am a poor wayfaring stranger while traveling through this world of woe. Yet there's no sickness, toil or danger in that bright land to which I go. I'm going there to see my Father. I'm going there no more to roam. I'm only going over Jordan. I'm only going over home. I know dark clouds might gather round me. I know my way is rough and steep, yet beauteous fields lie just before me, where God's redeemed their vigils keep. I'm going there to see my mother. She said she'll meet me when I come. I'm only going over Jordan. I'm only going over home. I'm going there to see my Father. going there, no more to roam. I'm only going over Jordan. I'm only going over home.
That was Russell Churcher from 𝗬𝗏𝗧. If you want to hear Russell playing, he'll be playing at the 𝗬𝗏𝗧 Folk Festival down there in 𝗏𝗏𝗃𝗃 in January.
You're listening to Marking the Role, a podcast for teachers and anyone interested in education. You can keep the podcast going by becoming a member or making a small donation through 𝗙𝗂𝗃𝗃 Coffee. Just go to markingtheroll.com.au and click on the yellow coffee cup. Thanks for listening.
We're going to go back to the panel discussion now and start off with a pretty sticky question. This is a bit of a sticky one. What about when you've got mandatory training that teachers don't necessarily agree with what is being said? Now, the thing that comes to mind is the most recent restraint policy and behaviour policies from the New South Wales Department of Education, where some teachers have said that they simply do not agree with it, but they have to go into training for it. Is there an answer to that problem?
I think that's a reflection of wider society at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah.
If if people can't freely express their views, and don't have the right to dissent, respectfully, then are we, do you have that free speech in your workplace? It's a tough one. How much would you be willing to sacrifice before you feel that you're no longer, true to your beliefs? That's a bit of a tough one. Marg, what do you think?
I think that's highly topical. So yes, look, I agree with that as well. It's there has to be that element, and certainly for me, working with the department, we don't have those sorts of freedoms, and it isn't that things are open really to our own moral compass or our own beliefs, our own ideas about how things should be handled. It is very much just follow the rules. So I think that can absolutely challenge teachers in their willingness to participate, their willingness to engage in PD, and therefore ultimately impacting on either their pedagogical development or their compliance.
Marg, do you think that is a major reason that teachers could be leaving the service the way they are?
Definitely. In the school that I am at, I do know of several teachers who have left because they don't agree with various policies. And I am also aware of teachers who have gone against what they think in order to remain.
Which is actually soul destroying for them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Josh, have you seen that from either your school or other schools?
Look, where I feel in our system, where somewhat sheltered from, not from all of those policies, but where I feel we're a little bit more sheltered. But I certainly know what Marg's getting at there.
It seems to me that it would be soul destroying for teachers to have to listen to and constantly comply with something that doesn't abide by their belief system. So you've both encountered that, or not personally, but you've probably seen it. Is that correct?
Yeah, at different times, particularly lately.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I I like to relate this to the Manly Sea Eagles rugby league team, where they had the inclusion game, and there was 7 mainly Pacific Island players who didn't agree with LGBTQI policies, or not all of them, and they said that they didn't agree with it, therefore they were stood down from the game. And I'm thinking, well, that's not very inclusive, is it?
Absolutely.
Where you have to believe in one certain thing, and anything else you're completely ostracised and stood down. It's like Putin's Russia. So I think that's a bit of an issue. Now, do you think NESA is moving the goalposts too much as far as PD goes? Have you got to do too much these days?
Well, the thing that we've struggled with, particularly over the last few years, we've been able to get our own school-based professional development accredited, which has meant that it's counted for teachers in the 50 hours of the NESA accredited professional learning for their accreditation renewal process every 5 years. But exactly like you say, they have moved the goalpost over the last couple of years, and they've made the process with getting school-based PD to be accredited and to count towards those hours. They've made that process much more difficult. And that now means that we're either having to attend third-party PD that's either system-based or from a commercial enterprise that's less relevant because it's not based on our needs. It's more expensive. And it's simply not related to our context. That's been difficult for our school, and I know that many schools and people across our system are expressing those same concerns.
What about you, Mark?
Yeah, I've sort of found the difficulty with the hours and the number of hours and the process in terms of maintaining your accreditation. I guess, and that does come down to them changing the goalposts. And I find that quite a few teachers that I'm aware of are now selecting PD that, as Josh said, isn't necessarily relevant to their needs, but they have big hours. And, there's some courses that you can do over 4 weeks, one afternoon a week, and you get 20 hours of PD for that.
Yeah, so you're just simply ticking the boxes to get the hours. It doesn't really matter what you do, as long as you do it. Yeah, but it takes away from the fact that people, in my day, you used to say, oh, okay, I really want to do that particular course, that really rung bells for you. And you would really, go jump through the hoops to get to that course. But it seems teachers aren't doing that these days.
No, I feel a lot of the time these days we're just wanting to get it done, get it out of the way, and then, you can focus on getting back to the job at hand.
Yep. A couple of emails have come through that teachers want to choose their own PD because they know the areas that they're lacking in. They want to be able to simply learn and improve the practice that they think that they're lacking in. Do you think there should be more allowance for that?
Certainly, but I think it comes down to it being a school decision. There has to be, I think, in order for that to be the case, I think there has to be flexibility in your school's leadership. Every school has an annual improvement plan that they're, working towards, achieving goals based on their data and their successes and failures over the previous years. But if your professional learning plan for the year is chock full of things that are working towards that, then your time really to go and do that individual learning that motivates you, that fits your needs, is really limited, because every week everybody has to attend 1 hour of staff meeting. Most schools have a general business meeting. Throw into that your full-time employment, and really, how much time do you have left in the day to that's unallocated to complete those things that really do matter.
Marg, what's your view of teacher-selected PD and maybe allowing that 80% of all of those hours can be teacher-selected?
I think that's definitely a necessity because, at the moment, it does really limit what you can do that's your own choice.
If the majority of allocated professional learning is at teacher discretion, I think it makes it difficult to have school-driven directions. But look, I think it's certainly something that we need to have more flexibility on, something that's planned and decided and set in concrete for the whole year.
Yeah, Josh, I do see your point, but I think that comes down to the PDPs and the effectiveness of your PDP and the meeting that you have with your mentor to determine what you do. So if the school has a specific focus, then surely as part of your PDP and the meeting with your mentor, you would be guided in that direction, and then you can still have a feeling, you can still have a voice, you can still have choice in what you do, but you are still working towards whatever the school's particular focus is, or if you're working towards the strategic directions, then that would be part of the PDP process, surely.
I'm interested to know, have either of you experienced PD that actually looks at the health and well-being of the teacher? Something like, keeping healthy at work, stress relief for teachers. Is there such a thing?
I have, yes, because that's part of my job. But I don't think that is a regular occurrence with most teachers, and not even necessarily at an executive level.
Look, I tend to agree. I have, but it's been very sort of minimal and doesn't have the same level of rigor that I would think that, the rest of our professional learning, demands.
Look, finally, do you think it's important that every PD provider, in other words, the teacher in the room, also has had recent classroom experience so that they understand how today's classroom operates and the difficulties that teachers have? Because in my experience, the ones who were doing the PD really hadn't been in a classroom recently. Do you think it's important?
I'm glad you brought that up, Phil. Absolutely.
Yeah, look, yeah. I think that the context for the classrooms has changed even in just the last 3 years. If I think back to what my classroom looked like pre-COVID, it was vastly different to what it looks like now. And so for someone to come in and start leading us on best practice, but I know that you haven't been teaching since the early noughties, please.
Yes, please. And I bet there's plenty of PD providers out there who haven't been in a classroom in the last 5 years when things have changed so much. You've been listening there to Josh O'Brien, a primary school teacher but also a science specialist in an independent school in Sydney, and Margaret Dwyer, a English head teacher at a departmental school in regional New South Wales. To balance things, I did invite 𝗂𝗫 𝗏𝗏𝐾𝗫, the CEO of the Teacher Quality Institute in the ACT, and they look after teacher professional development in the ACT, to give a different view, but she declined to come on the podcast. And next episode, we'll be looking at the different behaviour policies and restraint policies that are being introduced in different states. I know there's different policies being introduced in New South Wales. Tasmania is looking at other policies. And I'll be talking to a number of principals and teachers as to how these policies are going. I probably won't be talking to the New South Wales Education Department because I spoke to them about this matter in Series 1. They probably won't talk to me again. But these policies are being introduced in different states. Now, there was a case several years ago where a boy from a school phoned the principal and said that they were going to kill him. They went on social media and said that they were going to go and shoot up the school. Now, this student, because he was known, had access to guns and knew how to use them. Now, this didn't happen, but if the new policies are introduced, that student will be suspended for 2 weeks and then be let back into the school. Now, you wonder how other students feel about that, how their safety is impacted. You wonder how the safety and the well-being of teachers is impacted. So in New South Wales, I think it's pretty lucky. There's some advocates of special schools for these students who don't really fit anywhere else. But in Tasmania, they're taking pride that there'll be no special schools for these students who are very difficult, and they will be in a mainstream classroom. So I ask parents, what do you think about that? Do you feel good sending your kids to that school? So we'll be talking about how these new behaviour policies, restraint policies, are going in schools. My name's 𝗏𝗲𝗽𝗍. You've been listening to Marking the Role. See you next episode.